Hey guys, it's Candace.
And it's Elena.
And this is Cousins on Crime. I wanted to do it like Joseph Scott Morgan does it because I think he's way too cool. So, how you doing?
I'm good. Just starting my morning. Well,
Yeah.
not really just starting, but it's morning time.
Do you have your coffee?
I do. And actually, it's in this canteen that you sent me a long time ago. You remember that?
I do remember that.
Thought it was the perfect time to use it.
Yeah. I've also got my coffee. It's Saturday morning, by the way, guys. We're recording on a Saturday morning. I had a rough night last night, did not sleep, so I made a pot of coffee for myself. So I'm packing, I'm caffeinated, partially. So we're going to get into this. Now, this case that I have for you today is one that was suggested to us by one of our biggest fans, Tiffany Keir.
Oh, hey, Tiffany.
Now, to be fair, Tiffany is one of my very good friends, so she has to be a fan. I actually met Tiff when we worked together at a law firm, and we fell in love with each other very soon. Sadly, we didn't work on any, criminal cases, but it didn't stop us from talking true crime all the time.
Oh, yeah.
So she's just as passionate about this stuff as we are, Elena.
Oh. Yeah, I met her at the twins' birthday party.
Yeah.
And I was so proud of her. I was like, hey, guys, this is our fan. She listens to us. So she probably thought I was a weirdo, but...
She won a contest, and she was invited to the twins' birthday party. Like we're some special thing.
Yeah.
Well, I mentioned last week that the case that I have for you today happened in our hometown of Fort Worth, Texas. And I remember when this happened and just how devastating it was for the community. So let's get into it. In 2005, in Fort Worth, Texas, Lisa Underwood, a 34-year-old small business owner and single mother, was living a pretty normal life. She co-owned a bagel shop called Bupa's Bagel Deli, named after her 7-year-old son, Jaden. When Jaden was a baby, she called him Bupa. That was just one of his nicknames, which crushes my soul into a million pieces. And Lisa was actually 7 months pregnant at the time with a little girl. So she was just out there doing it.
Yeah.
Their bagels were perfect. And I happen to know this firsthand because when I was a senior in high school, I would go out of my way to go there in the mornings, multiple times a week sometimes, and get a bagel. I got a plain bagel, twice toasted, with plain cream cheese.
Of course.
And I remember one time I went in there literally 3 times that week. And by the 3rd time, I walked in and Lisa smiled and said to me, "Bagel, twice toasted with plain cream cheese."
Aww.
And I just felt like a superstar. I know she made all of her customers feel that way. You could just tell she was in her element and she was rocking it. You know, she was heavily pregnant, out there running a bagel shop, single mom. She was a boss babe before it was a hashtag. She was just one of those people. One of Lisa's regular customers, Leah Huff, got to know her really well, and she told CBS News that she saw Lisa a week before she went missing, and she was so excited about having a little girl. She talked about how she probably wasn't going to pick a name for her until she saw her face, but she really loved the name Marley. Leah also said that Lisa was so independent and she was basically Superwoman, like I just said, because she was raising her son by herself, running a business, slinging bagels, and she was about to have this other child, and it didn't seem to faze her. Like, she just was like, oh, I got this. Like, I can do all this.
Yeah.
So Lisa's son, Jaden, like I said, he was 7. He was a very smart little boy. Huge heart. He was so excited to be a big brother. He couldn't wait. He was silly and funny, and his teacher said that he was just a likable kid. You know how, like, most kids that age are just really annoying. But everyone liked him. He just got along with everyone. He was really caring and helpful. Like, someone would drop their pencil, he would go pick it up for them. He was just that type of kid. And if that wasn't enough on Lisa's plate, having all that going on, she somehow had time to date. She had met her boyfriend, Stephen Barbie, back in 2003 at her bagel shop. He was a frequent customer, and their relationship just kind of grew from seeing him, and then they started dating briefly. They only dated for a little bit initially, and then went their separate ways. And Lisa ended up dating a new guy who actually became like a serious boyfriend for about a year. And then later, in 2004, she and Steven kind of reconnected again. I don't know the details as to how that relationship with her serious boyfriend transitioned, like, into her relationship with Steven, but it just kind of fizzled back into reconnecting. So February 19th, 2005 was a very special day. It was Lisa's baby shower.
Aww.
Friends and family gathered, excited to celebrate her and her new baby. People were, coming and congregating, chatting, picking at the little carrot sticks and whatnot. And Lisa wasn't there yet, so people were just kind of waiting. And as time went on, and as the start time rolled by, Lisa still wasn't there, and people really started to worry.
Wow.
Not knowing, like, what could have happened, they knew that it couldn't be good. So she was immediately reported missing, her and Jaden, because they didn't arrive. They wouldn't just not go to that, you know? They wouldn't just say, oh, you know what? I don't feel like going. No, it was a celebration. She was so excited. So an Amber Alert was issued, and police immediately moved into action. We talk about these cases all the time, and when an adult goes missing, they're like, oh, sometimes they'll say, well, wait, 24 hours. Sometimes it's 48 hours. The circumstances were that she was pregnant and her son was also missing, so this was an immediate, serious situation for them. Investigators started by performing a welfare check on Lisa and Jaded by going to her home. Right away, they noticed that Lisa's blue Dodge Durango was not in the driveway, so initially they thought, oh, well, maybe she just left. Maybe she drove to her baby shower and broke down or something. And then as they approached the front door, they knocked to see if anyone was home. There was no sign of forced entry or anything like that. It just looked like nobody was home. So again, it just kind of confirmed, well, maybe she left and they weren't worried right away. But because of the seriousness of the situation, they decided to make entry into the home at some point. And what they found inside sent chills down their spine. Lisa and Jaden weren't there, but they found blood. A lot of blood.
Oh my gosh.
An affidavit stated that the amount of blood that was found all over the floors, walls, on the furniture, indicated that someone suffered serious bodily injury in that home. So right away, this already concerning situation had just escalated to full-blown panic.
Right.
They knew they needed to find them, and quick. A sheriff's deputy remembered something odd happening that night before, in the wee hours of that morning. He saw a man walking along the service road around 3 a.m. on February 19th. And he was covered in mud. It had been raining, so he was wet, And he obviously looked just out of place. He looked sus.
Right.
Why is this guy walking at 3 a.m.? And there's actually dash cam footage of this on YouTube, and I'll link it in the show notes. It was, I don't want to say funny, but it was just like a little bit humorous.
Oh, okay.
The officer asked this guy, you know, who he was, and he's like, David. And he gives this fake last name, fake date of birth. And the officer's like, what the French are you doing out here at 3 a.m., like, in the state that you're in, walking along the roadway? And he's like, oh, I'm just walking home. My car, broke down, and I'm just walking home. Well, the officer goes, okay, well, let me just check out your name, run your name and stuff. And as he turns to walk back to his car, you can see the officer kind of looking back over his shoulder like he doesn't trust this guy. He's like, there's something up with him. So he's kind of looking back, and then the guy takes off.
Oh my gosh.
Starts running into a wooded area, and the officer gives chase. He chased him over a barbed wire fence. Anyways, he loses him. He couldn't find the guy.
Right.
So he just remembered that happening and thinking, okay, we've got a missing mother and son. She's pregnant. Something weird happened really late last night. They kind of kept this in their back pocket. So in the following days, the police were making rounds, interviewing family and friends, asking if they could think of anyone who had any reason to take them or harm them in any way. When they learned the identity of the father of Lisa's unborn baby, naturally they wanted to speak to him.
Right.
And they learned that person was Stephen Barbie. I read a book called Lethal Charmer by Patricia Springer. I thought that was a really good name for him. It did a good job of filling in some of the details in the investigation and the trial, for that matter. So February 21st, this was just a few days later, Detectives Sullivan and Galloway went to Stephen Barbie's home, and from what I understand of reports, they just looked through his trash, because I guess he wasn't there at the time. They didn't find anything of significance, but while they were there, they did receive word that Lisa's SUV had been located in a remote location near a creek in Denton, Texas, which is about 30 minutes from Fort Worth. Actually near where that officer had stopped the David character.
Oh, okay.
Well, they dropped that trash like a hot potato, and they headed immediately to go check out this car. They arrived on scene where Lisa's car was all right, and the front was kind of submerged in a creek. It looked like someone just
crashed it into there and left.
Yeah, exactly. The windows were down and the hatchback was left open, which February? Why were the windows down? I don't know. They found a bottle of cleaner in the back of the car, as if someone was like, I'm going to clean this up. No, I'm just going to leave it.
Yeah, it's too much work. Here you go.
Exactly. Well, they were really keen on finding the keys to the vehicle, because they needed to transport it back to do all the forensic analysis back at the station. And they didn't want evidence to blow out of the windows on the way there.
True.
So they decided to do a little bit of work at the scene. They did the vacuuming and stuff. They cleared out the car of the loose items. And later, after transporting the vehicle, they were scouring the creek, and they did find Lisa's keys and purse in the creek where the car was.
Wow.
Her purse had her wallet and ID, so it didn't appear to be theft motivated, and I don't think they were thinking robbery was a motive anyways at that time.
Seems personal.
But exactly. Now, later that day, they wanted to catch up with the Stephen Barbie guy. He wasn't home at his home in Fort Worth, so they tracked him down to Tyler, Texas, which is about 2 hours from Fort Worth. And they met up with him in a Walmart parking lot.
Did he have a connection in Tyler? Did he have family there?
He worked there. He was working.
Oh.
And I'll get to that in just a second.
Okay.
But Walmart made me laugh. Isn't that just the sort of place you would find a guy like Stephen Barbie at Walmart? Now, I did see reports that said they found him actually working, clearing trees, which was what his job was. Like, he was out there doing a job. But the Walmart meetup was actually in an official court document, so I'm going to go with that one.
Okay.
They spoke with him and Trish, his wife, and his business partner, Ron Dodd.
Wait.
At the time.
Trish, his wife.
Trish Barbie.
Okay.
His wife, Lena.
Okay.
What, you think just because he had a girlfriend, he didn't have a wife as well?
Well,
right.
No words. Okay.
Okay. So they did speak in that parking lot, but they wanted to discuss further. So they asked them to come down to the station, and they did. They're in Tyler for further questioning. Now, back at the station, they put Stephen in one room, Ron in another room, and Trish was just kind of waiting in the lobby. Stephen was Mirandized, and then the questioning began about 7:45 p.m. Stephen really didn't seem fazed. Like, he gave no indication that he was nervous to be there. He was relaxed and kind of snickered at times about how he knew Lisa. He said that at the time he met her, he was dating so many women that he thinks that maybe he went on like 2 dates with her, but other than that, he had little to do with her. And he certainly hadn't seen or heard from her in a while, which we know is a lie because all of her friends said that they were dating. When asked where he was, February 19th, the day Lisa was reported missing, he said he was clearing trees that day in Tyler. I guess he was continuing that job he was at. He said later that evening, when he finished the job, he drove back to Fort Worth, which again was 2 hours. And then he went to his business partner, Ron's house. They were working on Ron's truck till the wee hours of the morning. And he said, I left there about 2 or 3 a.m. Now, he recounted it took him a while to drive home because his truck was, like, actively breaking down the whole way home. Like, the oil was leaking and he kept having to pull over. And he didn't live far from Ron. So this whole, it took me an hour to get home thing was like, He said he decided to sleep on the couch when he got there because his wife was asleep. He didn't want to wake her up. The interview continued. They knew he was BSing big time. And Detective Carroll stepped out of the room to go see what was happening over in Ron's room.
Yeah.
And by the way, just a little side note, Ron Dodd is his name. Do you prefer me calling him Ron or Dodd? When you're like, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I know. I mean, I prefer
when
Ron.
you do a case, you say, like, you use their last names sometimes. Sometimes I use their last names.
Well,
I don't know.
I prefer first names.
Yeah.
But yeah, Ron.
I prefer first names because it feels natural to me. I don't know. Write us. Tell us what you prefer.
Yeah.
Anyways, back to the story. In Ron's room, he claimed that he went to pick up Stephen because Stephen ran out of gas and said, he kind of confirmed what Stephen was saying in the other room, but he said, I saw bodies in the trunk.
I do, huh?
And I was like, no, I'm not going to be a part of this. So I left. I was scared.
Yeah.
So Detective Carroll was like, okay, that's interesting. So he goes back to Stephen's room and he laid some photographs on the table. They were of Lisa and Jaden. Lively, spirited, just to kind of see if he could elicit some type of reaction from him. He left him with the photos and left the room. And a couple minutes went by, and Stephen opened the door and asked if he could use the restroom. So Detective Carroll said, sure, I'll walk you down there. Like gal pals.
Yeah.
Let's go to the bathroom together. And he said, Dodd's in there laying this whole thing in your lap, right? And expressed to him how important, it was for Lisa's family to have closure to this situation. And he's like, just do the right thing, man.
Right.
You know, just a casual, you're peeing next to each other, shooting the breeze.
Mm-hmm.
And so he thinks, you know, our pants are down. Let's just lower our inhibitions as well. And maybe this guy will trust me. Well, it worked.
Okay.
It did work. So they spoke off the record in the bathroom for like an hour.
An
An hour.
In the bathroom.
I'm hoping they pulled their pants back up at this point, but he did confess to murdering Lisa and Jaden.
Oh my gosh.
I just wonder what investigators were feeling. I wonder what the detective was feeling in this moment.
Right.
Because they did find the blood in Lisa's home. And I'm sure seasoned detectives know that amount of blood is not going to be good.
Mm-hmm.
So they were probably leaning towards it not being a great outcome. But I think they hold on to like a sliver of hope. Because you do, right?
Yeah.
That's what propels you forward to find them, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you're just thinking, a pregnant woman and a child, like, we've got to find them alive. And then to hear that, what a gut punch.
Oh my gosh.
So Stephen said he didn't want his wife to find out about his girlfriend.
Of course he didn't.
His pregnant girlfriend.
Mm-hmm.
He said Lisa was asking him for money. She wanted him to be listed on the baby's birth certificate. And it was all just like getting too real for him.
Mm-hmm.
He knew that she was 7 months pregnant. At some point she was going to have this baby.
Mm-hmm.
And then it was going to be like evidence, you know? So here's what Stephen told police about the murders. He said he drove his car to Ron's house, and Ron dropped him off at Lisa's house around 10 p.m. the night of February 18th.
Mm-hmm.
That was the night before she was reported missing, if you'll remember.
Right.
Interestingly, Ron was not only his business partner. According to one of the appeals, Ron was also Stephen's ex-wife's boyfriend.
What kind of triangle or tangled web?
Tangled web, indeed. Anywho, he told detectives that he and Ron hatched this plan to go over to Lisa's and take care of her. Once Ron dropped Stephen off at Lisa's, he said he tried to pick a fight with her, but was unsuccessful. So Ron picked him up, took him back to his house, Ron's house, and then later took Stephen back over to Lisa's, where he was finally successful in picking a fight with her.
Mm.
So this whole picking a fight thing was interesting to me because I feel like maybe he was angling for like self-defense.
Oh,
you know?
A ruse.
Like maybe if he made her so mad that she would make the first move, you know? Or maybe he's just another form of evil and he was almost like taking credit for making her mad before he killed her. Either way. Well, they began arguing, as you would if you were pregnant and your boyfriend was married. He said he wasn't going to leave his wife. Who really knows what she thought? I think the most important thing to her was that she would have some sort of support from him, whether it was insurance or money or whatever. But he was acting like, so what? I mean, she had this beautiful life growing inside of her. She was so excited to expand her family, and she just wanted a little assistance, and he was just like, no. So, Lisa, he knew that all of this coming out, putting the baby on his insurance and all that stuff, that was like a surefire way for his wife to find out, right? I mean,
yeah.
Obviously the baby herself would have been a tangible thing, but I think he could deny a lot up to that point.
Right.
And the whole insurance thing, that was like a paper trail to him. So he was really, for some reason, that freaked him out more than the baby. Well, Lisa kicked him in the leg, and I say, you go, girl. And he just lost his mind. He punched her, square in the face.
Yeah.
And her nose started bleeding everywhere.
Oh my gosh.
He began wrestling her to the ground, held her face to the carpet until she stopped breathing.
Good Lord.
Which probably didn't take that long, according to the medical examiner, because she was pregnant.
Uh-huh.
And obviously, your lung capacity in that state is
There's already
very
pressure.
diminished.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So when he heard his mother screaming, banging around, furniture being clanked around, Jaden ran in and starts going fisticuffs with Barbie.
Oh,
He's
my
trying to
gosh.
get him off of his mom, and Barbie just turned to Jaden and he placed his hand over his nose and mouth until Jaden stopped breathing.
Oh my God.
Stephen decided he was going to clean this up, so he went and got his little bottle of cleaner, and he starts rubbing the carpet, and it's not working because #blood. And he starts moving furniture around to try and maybe hide some of this blood, and it wasn't working because there was just a lot. I mean, it was all over the carpets.
Oh, Lord.
So Stephen loaded up Lisa and Jaden's bodies into Lisa's SUV, and he headed out to FM 407, where he used a shovel that he says Ron Dodd gave him to bury the bodies. Now, all this came out in the bathroom, so they needed to get all of this on tape.
Right.
So they had to bring him back to the interrogation room and have him lay all this out again. And at this point, it's 11 p.m. when they start to tape this second interview. He was saying that the bodies were buried back in Denton.
Okay.
An hour and a half, nearly 2 hours away. So maybe because it was so late, they decided to go find them in the morning. I'm not really sure why they said, oh, we'll go get them tomorrow. I didn't see any details about that. Maybe he hadn't agreed to take them to where their bodies were buried because...
Or they just wanted daylight.
Maybe, but I have to think... Wouldn't you just want to go out there
Yeah,
and
for sure.
recover the bodies immediately?
So you're right. Maybe he
know.
just didn't release that information.
Yeah, I couldn't find anything definitive as to why they waited until the next morning, but they did. So after Stephen gave his second interview, Trish was out there in the lobby this whole time.
Yeah, I'm sitting here wondering
she's sitting
about
out there
her.
waiting. I don't know what she's doing. Maybe a crossword puzzle. I don't know. But she's like, what is taking so long? What is going on? I want to speak to him. So Detective Carroll starts walking her down the hall, and he said, he just confessed to killing Lisa Underwood.
Oh, my Lord.
And she's like, what? So she gets in the room, and Stephen basically tells her everything that he just told detectives, but in a I didn't mean to type of a way. I was scared you were going to find out, and I held her down too long. I didn't mean for her to die.
Right.
And actually, when he was speaking to Trish, nothing came up about Jaden. So Trish decided she was going to stand by her man.
Oh.
Don't worry, that changes later, spoiler alert. So Stephen spent the night in Smith County Jail, and the next morning he did take them to the area off FM 407 where there had clearly been disturbed ground near the creek where Lisa's car was found. And there were 2 shallow graves with debris sort of haphazardly thrown on it so nobody would find them. The bodies were not immediately determined to be Lisa and Jaden, but they were consistent with their ages, so they were pretty confident they had found them, and they were eventually later identified as Lisa and Jaden Underwood. Now, family and friends had actually scheduled a candlelight vigil for the 21st to pray for Lisa and Jaden's safe return, to plead for any information that anyone might have, and because they found them that morning, it just turned into a memorial. So they still gathered, they still lit candles. The community was just stunned and heartbroken. I mean, it wasn't...
Yeah, for sure.
The bagel shop had been there for a few years, and actually it's still there today. It's just part of the community.
Yeah.
And then you have a 7-year-old A 7-year-old and an unborn baby. Like, how senseless is this? And the parents were taking Jaden's friends to this memorial. How do you explain to your 7-year-old that his friend is never coming back?
Oh,
like, I just
goodness.
can't put my mind there. Now, trial. Let's get to that because Stephen was arrested, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
So during the trial, the defense tried to poke holes in the timeline of events. They tried to pick apart the state's forensic experts. They blamed the whole plan of Lisa's murder on Ron. I mean, what else were they going to do? He confessed to it.
Right.
So at this point, you know how Ron took Stephen over to Lisa's twice? Like, he took him over there. He couldn't pick a fight. Then he took him back. Well, Stephen now claims that Ron took him back over there because he was like, you need to kill her now, man. Or else
it was his idea.
Yeah, so they tried to spin it like, go back over there and take care of her. So, now, we have a clear motive in this case, right?
Mm-hmm.
Stephen Barbie said it himself. He didn't want his marriage ruined because he cheated on his wife and got another girl pregnant, right?
Mm-hmm.
But in the trial, a total bomb was dropped. Stephen was not the father of that unborn baby.
What?
Lisa thought he was.
Oh my
But DNA
gosh.
confirmed that it was actually her ex-boyfriend who was the father.
Wow.
So, all for nothing.
No.
I would have loved to have seen his face.
Oh my gosh.
Now, Tarrant County Chief Medical Examiner Dr. Mark Krause testified that Lisa's right forearm was broken. Her head was black and blue. She had large bruises all over her head. She had a black eye. She had bruises on her back that were consistent with someone, like, kneeling on her back.
Oh, Lord.
So that was consistent with Stephen's confession. And all this taken together was indicative of a beating as well. He didn't just suffocate her, he beat her up.
I mean, her arm was broken.
So he left that part out. Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Jaden's autopsy confirmed that Jaden did die of asphyxia. He had injuries to his lips and his gums that were consistent with someone's hand forcefully being placed over his mouth, and he did have bruises on the side of his head. So, totally senseless, totally unnecessary.
Yeah.
Oof. In the punishment phase, Stephen's ex-wife, Teresa, testified during sentencing. Remember Teresa?
Mm-hmm.
I mentioned her earlier. She was married to Stephen, but now she's dating Ron.
Uh-huh.
Remember that
Right.
one? Well, she told the court that Stephen assaulted her when they were married, and she sustained quite the concussion
Yeah.
because of that assault.
I'm not surprised.
No, I'm not either. Stephen left her bleeding, and when she kind of came to, Stephen was in the other room eating ice cream, just having a scoop or two,
Oh, my Lord.
maybe some Rocky Road.
While she's waking up from a concussion.
Exactly. And he's like, you can drive yourself to the hospital.
Oh.
And she did.
And then she divorced him.
Exactly. Well, she also said that he threatened to put her through a wood chipper at one point in their relationship. And something else she said was that she was with Ron the night that Lisa and Jaden were murdered. She was there when Ron was coming back and forth to the house. You know how you dropped him off, picked him up,
Right, okay.
dropped him back off, picked him up. I read some reports that he had multiple times, like, he took Stephen to some elementary school, dropped him off, and then took him. I couldn't find any proof to substantiate any of that, but I think the point is that there was just a lot of coming and going from Ron that night. Like, he was very much, he knew what was going on,
okay.
you know?
Mm-hmm.
So she even overheard one of the conversations when Stephen called and said, hey, come help me. I need you to come help me with this.
Girl.
So she saw Stephen 2 days later, and this was the day before Lisa's car was found. And Stephen was crying to her, saying his life was over, and she asked him if he had anything to do with this missing woman that was all over the news. And she said, what did you do? And the reports are really unclear as to, like, what the rest of the conversation was like, but whatever he was mumbling, she knew he did something to her. Like, she knew he had some involvement. And then she also knew, because Ron, how suspicious he was acting that night. Also, at the sentencing phase, one of Stephen's former coworkers claimed that he came on to her. He said, yeah, I'll come out and give you a quote for clearing some trees at your house. And he goes out to her house when she wasn't there, and he just cut all of her trees down. Like, yeah, he trimmed all of the trees without her asking him to. So he thought she should have sex with him.
Oh,
like,
right.
Because he did all that for her. And he was like, I can't believe that you would treat me like that after I cleared all those trees for you. And she's like, I'm happy to pay you for the work. I was really just wanting a bid, but at this point, now that you've done the work, I'm happy to pay you. Well, he assaulted her verbally because he wasn't having it. He wasn't a nice guy. And, you know, there was a handful of people that told the court Stephen did some good things in his life, but the court just wasn't having it.
No, this can't compensate for murder.
No, of course not. Now, I didn't mention before, obviously he was convicted of capital murder. And in the sentencing phase on February 27th, 2006, he was sentenced to death.
Wow.
Goodbye. So, what about Ron Dodd?
Yeah.
I mentioned his involvement. Stephen claimed he was involved in the planning and the disposal of the bodies. He says that, you know, Ron came and helped him bury the bodies. He gave them the shovel. He came to his senses and ended up admitting to helping dispose of the bodies. He says he was not involved in the planning. He didn't know anything about that, which, come on.
Yeah.
No, I don't believe it. And I'll tell you why I don't believe it in just a second. Early on, they weren't really sure what Ron's role was, if any. They knew that he, you know, was giving all these rides to Stephen. But they were sure that he had violated his parole. You see, Ron was arrested in 1997 on something like 9 counts, including a family violence charge, an assault charge.
9
so
counts.
He was just another stand-up guy. And when he assaulted his current girlfriend, Teresa Barbie, Stephen's ex-wife,
right,
that was a violation of his parole. So they arrested Ron. They're like, dude, we're putting you in our back pocket until we get this thing figured out. Now, they told him, we're going to take your booty to trial. But he was like, listen, I'll plead guilty. So he pleaded guilty to 2 counts of tampering with evidence. He would only admit to the disposal of the bodies.
Okay.
He got 10 years in prison.
10. 10 years.
10 years. Now, Stephen appealed his death sentence and capital murder convictions. He said the evidence that was collected and presented in trial didn't support malice aforethought in either Lisa's or Jaden's murders. I read some of this appellate brief and I was nauseated that he'd confessed to the murders in detail, yet he wants to split hairs about the evidence that the state presented.
Right, he's like, I did it, but it wasn't
to
that
support
bad.
His confession. It's like, there were 9 arguments in there that were laid out. Anyway, it was just stupid. Well, they upheld the ruling, of course. While in prison, over the years, Stephen suffered with a condition that caused diminished range of motion in his joints, and it got to the point where he was unable to straighten his arms and his fingers. So he was kind of
shriveling up.
Yeah. He was in a wheelchair. He needed to be cleaned after he used the toilet. And for the victim's family and friends, if I were the victim's family and friends, I would take comfort in knowing he's not in prison, reading leather-bound books and working out in the prison yard and getting all buff and stuff. I would take joy knowing that he was suffering.
Yeah.
I just would, because I'm cold-hearted like that. And if you take my family away from me, then why should you get to
It's hard to
live it
forgive
up?
something like that.
Yeah.
But you know, when you have sin and evil in your heart, it's going to eat your body up, and it sounds like
Yeah.
that's what's happening to him.
Oh, yeah. But, you know, I'm just sort of that person. Lena, you probably would be like, I forgive you. But I would be like, ha, he's shriveling up. Ha, 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 ha. Well, Stephen Barbie's execution date was originally scheduled for 2019, but it was stayed because the Texas Court of Appeals was investigating Barbie's claim that his attorney at trial told the jury he was guilty, which he did not want him to say. Again, splitting hairs.
Mm-hmm.
You've got a confession, and then you're going to say, it's just semantics at that point.
Yeah,
Come on.
absolutely.
Now, this claim stated that Barbie's Sixth Amendment right was violated because he wanted to maintain his innocence, and he was requesting a new trial. No, he was stalling at this point, is what he was doing.
Yeah.
Texas Court of Appeals ruled that Barbie did not specify to his attorney in plain, clear enough terms that he wanted to maintain his innocence, and he was not eligible for a new trial. No surprise there. The execution was then set for October 2021, so he was successful in delaying like that for another 2 years, which is just how our justice system works at a snail's pace. But the U.S. District Court Judge Kenneth Hoyt canceled that date.
Oh.
You see, Barbie found God while he was in prison, and he wanted his pastor to lay hands on him while he was being put to death. But the practice of someone touching you as you were being administered the lethal injection had been banned years before. So Barbie said that violated his religious rights.
Oh, no.
And the high court agreed. So the prison agreed to accommodate him during his lethal injection, and the date was rescheduled. So again, he's just trying to delay the inevitable here. And actually, his attorney tried to get the execution date moved again because he said, look, this guy can't straighten his arm. So you want to put the needle in the crook of his arm, and like, that's just not going to work because he can't straighten his arm. If you tried to straighten his arm, it would be incredibly painful for him. And I'm just like, I'm sorry?
Yeah.
I'm sorry? No. And the courts were like, y'all chill. I'll stick you somewhere else. Like, keep your arm crumpled up. I don't care. I'm going to stick it in your body either way. And they did stick it in his body because Stephen Barbie was finally executed November of this year.
Wow.
Goodbye.
Wow. And I hope he really did find God.
Well, you know, maybe he did, maybe he didn't. But I don't want to end this episode talking about that monster. He murdered 3 people.
Yeah.
3 whole people.
Yeah.
That fetus was a healthy baby girl. I mean, she's past viability at that point.
Right.
So that's 3 whole people. And I want to bring it back to Lisa, Jaden, and baby girl Underwood. You know, when the 3 of them were taken from this world, a family was torn apart. A community was torn apart and left stunned and devastated. Like, the world grew a little darker that day, I think. I think you know, especially since there was a child involved, and he had so many friends and teachers, and you just have this, like, spider web of people that were affected. I think we just owe it to them to live a little bit lighter today and be kind.
Yeah.
It's such a simple concept, and it really does make a difference.
Yeah, and it's really not that hard.
Exactly. It takes so much less energy to be kind than it does to be rude or to contribute to the darkness. The person who just cut you off in traffic, the person who, you know, the waitress that's a little bit inattentive to you. You just have no idea what someone might be going through behind the scenes, so just be nice.
Yeah.
Let's do it for Lisa and Jaden and little baby girl Marley.
Yeah.
By the time this is airing, it will be a week removed, but Twitch, the famous dancer who took his life, it really affected me because, I've struggled with depression too. This really has nothing to do with the story other than just to be nice and kind to people because you just really never know.
Well, and even those who are a bright light, who do shine joy and is always smiling, they're going through something too.
It's so draining, like being a performer and giving your energy, your love, your light to others. And they're sucking it from you. And I can imagine when you are at that level of a performer, people expect that from you.
Right.
And you feel like that's your identity. You have to be on all the time. You have to make them happy. You have to, be the light. And you just never know. Like, I'm not over it. I
know. It really shook me too. I feel for his wife and kids. Devastating.
Yeah. Let's just be nice to everybody. Like, you just never know. You never know when it could be the last time you see someone.
You're so right.
You never know when the owner of the bagel shop is going to be gone and her son's going to be gone.
Yeah.
And life is so short. Sometimes it scares me. Like, I already have anxiety, but just thinking of that, I'm just like, oh, it's so fragile.
Yeah, you're exactly right.
So,
I know.
Anyways, I'll leave it at that. I hope everybody can do something nice for someone today. It can just be as simple as a smile or holding the door open for someone. Just put a little bit of light back into the world.
Yeah, show God's love. And I don't know if y'all are believers, but that's a good challenge, Candace. Thank you for that.
Yeah. So anyway, this was great. Let's do it again. Do it again next week.
Yeah. We'll talk to y'all later, guys.
All right. Bye.
Bye. Well, thank you for listening to Cousins on Crime. If you're enjoying our podcast, please leave us a 5-star rating so that other true crime fans can find us.
If you have any case suggestions or just want to say hey, email us at cousinsoncrime@gmail.com. And be sure to follow us on Instagram where we post case photos and information at Cousins on Crime Podcast.